Sharon George, who's a senior lecturer in environmental science at Keele University and joins us now from Staffordshire in the UK. Welcome to the News Hour. Great to have you here. Lots to talk about, but first of all, just how vulnerable and dangerous are these areas around glaciers?
Well, glaciers are a dynamic system. We're used to seeing them grow and shrink back, but this that we're seeing now is much more erratic. And as global temperatures start to rise, we're going to see more of this happening. And so any communities living downstream are going to be vulnerable to these shocks. So, as we move forward, unless we tackle climate change, but even just with the emissions that we've already produced, climate change is already happening, and some of that process is already in motion. So we do need to be careful that these events are going to be more frequent, and anybody living downstream is going to be more at risk because of climate change.
And that was my next question to you. People are living there and they're constructing there. Just how worried are you about this in India and in other places in the world?
Well, this is unprecedented. These changes that are happening are unprecedented. We have no past experience of this happening on the scale that we're seeing. So, any new builds further downstream need to take into account that this is a risk. So things can be put in place like early warning systems. But we do know that as climate change happens, this is going to happen on a more frequent basis.
How do you communicate that and get people to take action and maybe not continue building there? And how do you communicate that urgency and the fact that this is unprecedented, as you've said?
Well, I think governments have a big role to play in this and regulating the spaces downstream. The problem that we have is that these areas have massive potential for energy production, which is massively needed in those areas. This meltwater is relied on by billions of people for drinking water, but also for energy from the hydroelectric schemes that are there. So to some extent, some build work there is necessary, but we need to balance that risk and manage that risk by having much more information about what's happening upstream and monitoring these events more closely. And unregulated build needs to be tackled if we're going to avoid events like this in the future.
Absolutely, unregulated building. And where in the world, what glaciers are you watching, are you concerned about, and seeing a repeat of what happened here?
Well, this isn't an isolated event. Glaciers across the world are in retreat because of climate change. We're seeing glaciers reducing fastest in Western Canada and in Central Europe. We're seeing really rapid increase in the rate of ice loss, and this is going to have impacts for the future. We're going to see an increase in meltwater, but then after that, we're going to see a reduction. So this is not just a short-term impact. We need to think about the future, and those people are going to be affected through not having access to that drinking water and that water that they rely on for farming. And so this is going to exacerbate other impacts on climate change as we move forward, in future decades.
And you mentioned Canada and Europe. Is regulation more controlled? Is construction more regulated there?
It is. Regulation internationally, is different depending on where we are, and I think we have a lot to learn from each other. And if we can, as we move forward and we tackle climate change, and if internationally we can work together and share best practice and governments can learn from each other, I think that will help.
Great to get the science on this. Thank you so much, Sharon George, Senior Lecturer in Environmental Science at Keele University in the UK. Appreciate your time and analysis.